This is my brand new transmission that's ready to be installed into my supercharged all-wheel drive Silverado. But instead of putting it in today, we are going to completely tear it apart, find out what's really on the inside, throw a few new parts in that'll hopefully improve the holding power of this transmission and prepare it for a life of torture behind my LSA. But there's also the possibility that while we're in there, we either discover something that's totally wrong or we cause problems ourselves by, tearing a gasket, forgetting a check ball, or otherwise messing something up and converting this somewhat expensive and very heavy transmission into a useless paperweight. So let's jump right in and tear this thing apart. $10 at Harbor Freight, get yourself like 4 of these. So this transmission is the GM 4L80, and it's actually a very strong transmission. In fact, it's probably one of the strongest factory automatics that they produced for a very long time. Yeah, some of the newer 6-speed stuff like the 6L90 or the 8L90, some of that stuff is fairly strong, but this is kind of like the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. It's an old school transmission. It's based on a Turbo 400. But basically, it's fairly strong, but we can make it better just by doing a few simple hydraulic improvements. So we're going to pull the valve body out here. We're going to take the guts out. There's a part somewhere right around the middle of the center support that we need to get out. We're going to modify that. And basically, you can take a strong transmission and make it just a little bit stronger. That's the hope anyway. How are you going to get out? So just a short while later, we have all of the internal parts of the transmission laid out on the table. Starting up front here with the pump, we've got a 4th clutch, there's an overrun, an overdrive, we got the center support, and we got a whole bunch of other just clutch packs, gears, sprags, we got the valve body. Basically everything that would have made this a functioning transmission has now been removed from the case, and we've got ourselves just a big fancy aluminum casting. But the real question is, if this was a brand new, or I guess technically remanufactured transmission that was ready to run, why are we going through the effort of taking it apart? Well, to answer that question, we're going to go for a quick drive. So this is the truck that our transmission is going to be going into. It's a 2000 Silverado. It's got an LSA supercharger up front. It's got a 4L60 currently in the middle, and it's all-wheel drive. It's a fairly heavy vehicle, about 4,800 pounds, and it's somewhat powerful, right around 530 horsepower at the wheels right now. And those are like the worst two enemies of any transmission, a heavy vehicle and an engine that makes a lot of power, especially
when you combine the two together. Now, we are going to be increasing the power of this thing a whole lot in the future, and in fact, we have a few races coming up. We have been called out, and I'll tell you guys more about that in just a little bit. But we're going to be asking a lot of the transmission that's in this truck. Right now, the 4L60 is actually kind of hanging in there, but I know long-term it's not the best solution. Yeah, you can build them up, but to me, I would much rather just kind of bite the bullet, swap to the much stronger transmission, and then upgrade from there if we have to. So I think my ultimate goal is probably like 600 or 700 horsepower from this vehicle. I don't know if we're going to do it with a 4.8. I don't know if I'll switch to something bigger like a 6-liter, but either way, the transmission in here long term is not up to the task. Although some people do kind of debate that. So anyway, that's why we're swapping to a 4L80, but there are a few improvements that we're going to make even from the stock baseline on the transmission. You know, a few hydraulic changes to increase the holding power, and there's a few just call them architecture changes, really simple stuff that we need to switch to make it actually work in this truck, like making the provision for the park reverse neutral gear position switch, the shifter cable bracket, and so on. Simple stuff, some of it is deep inside the transmission. Either way, I figured we might as well knock it out of the park before we put it in the truck. So, let me show you the parts that we're going to be using. Basically, we're using a Transgo HD2 shift kit, but we're skipping a few steps. One, we're not going to be installing the pressure relief valve, and two, we are not going to be installing their separator plate. The separator plate does dual feed the direct drum, but we're going to accomplish that just a little bit differently. First, to dual feed it, we're going to leave off the second sealing ring on the center support. We are also going to plug off, let's see, this hole right here, which is to the right of the center support bolt. That gets plugged off with like a freeze plug type deal. And then finally, we're going to take apart the direct drum and remove the inner sealing ring, and then also drill a teeny tiny hole to prevent centrifugal apply, and then swap out some springs there. But the direct feeding of that drum is basically the 3 steps. 1, leaving off that seal, 2, plugging that hole, and 3, leaving off the inner lip seal and the drum. And those 3 things together are basically going to triple the holding power of that clutch, which is active in 3rd gear. So why not? It works, right? The one thing that I definitely would recommend if you're doing a 4L80 in any vehicle is a good quality torque converter, because the 1st gear ratio of this transmission isn't quite as good for taking off as the one in the 4L60, but the trade-off to that is it has a tighter gear spread compared to the 4L60. But the converter that I'm running is a Circle D 265 millimeter converter. This one's rated at, I believe, like 3,500 RPM stall speed. And the only difference between this and the converter I have in the ugly truck is this is a triple disc lockup, where that one over there is a single disc, but I kind of wish I put a triple disc in that one. Also, we grabbed a Circle D billet flex plate because why not? This allows the 4L80 to go onto the LS without using any sort of a spacer, because they have the right dish on the flex plate and they have the correct length on the converter pilot, so we don't need a spacer. But anyway, check out Circle D. Do me a favor, guys, because they help support this channel. I love the converter we're running in the ugly truck. I'm gonna love the converter that we'll put in the step side. It's good quality stuff. And give those guys a call too. Like if you're trying to put together a combination, if you're maybe not sure of what you need, tell them about your vehicle, tell them how much it weighs, what camshaft, what your turbo is, or whatever, and they will help spec a converter that's going to do exactly what you need it to. So anyway, that's more or less the parts that we're going to be installing. One teeny tiny change we're going to be making is the longer shift shaft, so we can put the external neutral safety switch or whatever on there. The valve body does get to come apart, but let's start. Let's get our shift kit installed. So the only reason I'm doing this here is just so when I reassemble this transmission, this assembly grease kind of acts like glue to make sure these few washers, bushings or bearings or whatever you want to call them, just to make sure they stay in place and don't fall out. So there is one sprag in this last little stack of clutches. So you can see, basically this is everything from the center support down. I'm loading it in all at once, just because it'll make my life a little bit easier. So as long as that last washer doesn't fall off, I think we're good to go. And we're home. All right, so these springs are going to get replaced with the ones in the shift kit. And then underneath this piston here is the one seal we need to remove. Not that one, because that's part of the piston that's important to make it move, also there. But this inner lip seal right down there. This is the one that has to come out to properly dual feed this drum. Just like that. All right, so one more thing we're going to do is we are going to drill a teeny tiny hole somewhere right along this edge just to prevent what's called centrifugal apply. So I'm going to center punch it, drill a 62 thousandths or 1/16 of an inch hole just along this outer edge here. You don't want to get into the sealing surface on the side, so we're just going to kind of center punch a little hole right about here. All right, so we got her all cleaned out. There's our little hole right there. Once again, not on the seal surface. Put the piston back in. It can be a little bit tricky, but I've got a little tool for that.
So I did forget to hit record while I was putting this return spring assembly back in place, but it's just the opposite of removal. A snap ring here, use a compressor to push the springs down. This guy here I picked up from Amazon. I think it's like a $20 or a $15 tool. Definitely not the greatest quality, but it'll get the job done. So I don't really see any other way around it. You can buy a really, really expensive spring compressor, but if you only do 1 or 2 of these a year, that'll get the job done. So we have the inner lip seal out. We have the return spring swapped out from the shift kit. All the clutches are back in place, and this assembly is ready to go back in the transmission.
So what I'm about to do here is install this new pressure regulator valve assembly into the pump. These gears right here, this is what moves the fluid in the automatic transmission. These are spun by the outside the torque converter. Basically, this new stuff here will provide more pressure, more hydraulic pressure than the old stuff. So in it goes. All right, one thing to keep in mind is the two halves of the pump, they can kind of wiggle around like you see. So they do make a tool, which is basically just a big V-band clamp. This one's dirty, so I'm going to clean it off before I use it. But basically, you put it on there, tighten it up, and it lines up both halves of the pump. Oh yeah, take lots of pictures, it helps. So this is the moment of truth, guys. As long as the front pump bolts back into the housing, we know we have everything inside. And once you know it, we have success. And the best part is we only have 3 extra parts left over from this rebuild, which normally would make you scratch your head, but it's okay. Those 3 parts are not intended to go on the transmission. I'll show you those in just a bit. But this is our finished product for today. We started out with a completely brand new transmission. We tore it 100% apart, and now we have everything put back together on the inside with just a couple of modifications that are going to help this transmission survive better in a high performance, high power application. Next time we'll show you the valve body stuff. I don't have time for that today because we have something coming up tomorrow that I need to drive to. Here's the valve body, and these are the 3 extra parts. So not a big deal at all. The Transgo shift kit comes with a better, thicker snap ring, so that explains that guy there. And these 2 seals here are from the direct drum, which you have to omit these in order to dual feed the direct clutch, as well as that little teeny tiny freeze out plug that I installed right there. That's a 3/8 inch plug, by the way. Probably should have tapped that for like a 1/8 inch NPT plug, but that'll hold. That's what I did in my last one, and it's working just fine. So what are we doing tomorrow? Well, we're going drag racing with the ugly truck behind me here. And we were supposed to go like last weekend, but that track was an 1/8 mile track, and they actually canceled their event. And so I said, screw it. I want to get this truck on a 1/4 mile track. So we are traveling a little bit further from home, which is going to definitely hurt the pocketbook, filling up the AT4 with diesel fuel nowadays. Just saw $5.69 a gallon in my hometown here in Utah, which is just like, I don't understand it, but yeah, fuel prices are definitely going to hurt for this trip. But we've got our drag radials on the back. We have the turbo or the wastegate tuned up. We're going to have more boost than we've ever run before. We've got more timing in this thing than I ever have. So we are either going to come home with this thing busted, or we're going to have a new fastest truck on the channel. I guess, or the third option is I'll be just disappointed with a slow truck, but I don't know. Anyway, I'll show you that all next time. I'm really excited to get the ugly truck on a proper 1/4 mile, and I'm calling my shot. I want to run an 11. We had the COPO truck that ran a 12:10, 12:11 in the 1/4 mile, so got my fingers crossed. I would really, really, really love to have this truck run an 11 with the stock engine in here. I think that would be really, really cool, but we'll get to that next time. Anyway, oh, I was also going to explain the call out because I posted that on my story on here, but we have a call out against the COPO truck, the 4.8 LSA step side, and I accepted the call. There's a guy named John who I think lives in Louisiana, and he has a turbo 4.8 Silverado, which is really cool because with the supercharged 4.8 that I have, I think it'll be a really awesome comparison. So I accepted the call out. We are going to race. We do have to figure out the logistics because we're like 2,000 miles apart, but we'll figure that out soon, guys. One more race to look forward to. The 4L80 is nearly done. I'll show you the shift kit next time, or next time. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate it. Do me a favor though, if you've made it this far, like this video, subscribe to the channel. I am trying to reach 100,000 subs. And finally, drop a comment down below on this video to let me know what you'd like to see next. Thank you guys. I do appreciate you. We'll catch you again soon.